Hey everybody, we're live. It is 𝙎𝙀𝙾𝙆𝙎, goldsilverpost.com. It is Tuesday, December 27th, 2022. This is going to be the last live of 2022, guys. Oh my God, can you believe it? We're there already. Thank you everybody for joining the program. We're going to do a quick sound check. Sound is working. We're using a new tool today, as you guys will see, and we expect everything to go off without a hitch. Thank you, Mr. Frowine, for joining the broadcast and riding shotgun as our moderator. We appreciate having Peter here. And as a reminder, we do have super chats are open. So if you want to leave a super chat and get an answer to a question, just go ahead and pop that in there and I will find it on the screen and answer that question for you. As a reminder, as we always do on Tuesday night live streams, we have a poll up related to the subject. And the subject today is, how much gold does China have? I'm going to look at that. I'm going to do an examination and we're going to tell you what I think. The poll is basically asking what's going on with China's gold reserves. Do they have the ton they say they do? Do they have more? Do they have less? Or did they go by the Grand Canyon and get all that gold that 𝙃𝙀𝙍𝙀 says that they have? We don't know, but we know they have a lot, and that's what we're going to examine. Thank you, everybody, for joining into the program. Caleb is here. Thank you, Caleb, for joining the program. I have 𝙎𝙀𝙍𝙀𝙍 is here as well. Hopefully, I got your name correct, Eric. Thank you for joining the program. We're going to get basically straight into the share, so let me go ahead and start presenting. I'm just going to kind of start off today with some basic information on what's going on with the China's gold market. So here you can see a report from the World Gold Council, and let me make sure that's up on screen and everything is working as intended. Yep, we're good. And this is just a healthy outlook for China's gold market. They're reporting that China has strong appetite for gold. And indeed, if you look at this chart, it's rebounded since 2020, the pandemic year in which some of the gold consumption went down in China. It definitely has gone back up. And consumption is basically how much China is taking off of the world market, if you wish, for their private and public and commercial needs. And so they've had a healthy appetite for it. And so a lot of people, have just speculated how much do they actually have. And that's largely because people have come out and surmised that, China may decide to back up their currency with gold. And if they do, the question is, do they have enough? And would they actually be able to do it and actually get away with it? And some people think they do. Some people think they don't. It's a popular topic of conversation. I think here you can see that according to the World Gold Council, Chinese gold jewelry demand is going to continue to go up throughout the year. And if we go down here a little bit farther, Chinese gold and coin demand is expected to go up further. So one of the things I wanted to do is figure out, okay, how much do they actually have? And is this figurable? Can we figure out how much gold and silver that they have? Can we put a number on it? And I think we can get pretty darn close. I mean, there's no exact number. You guys know, following the gold and silver market, that a lot of the time, simply this is private transaction. We don't necessarily know what is there, but I think there's enough data to make a pretty good guess, and that's what we're going to do. So going over to some data that I pulled. This is a nice chart from Gold Charts R Us from Nick Laird. Love his charts, are always very helpful. Here you can see annual gold production down here in yellow from the Chinese, and it's somewhere but usually between 200 to 450 or so tons. And it basically peaked here in the middle of this decade and has come down, but they're still continuing to produce, and they're still one of the world's largest producers of gold. We're also seeing here with the red bars, the Shanghai Gold Exchange withdrawals. That's important because almost no gold actually ever leaves China. And I'll show you how I know that here in a moment. That basically the government has a restriction on how much gold can actually leave and be exported. There are only, I believe, 13 entities, according to the Chinese information that we received on the website, that can export the gold, and most of it never leaves. And I'll show you how much is actually left this year, which is not much. So we know that all of the production, domestic mine production, is in no shape or form allowed to leave the country. And most of what comes off of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, whether it's coming from another entity in the world, or whether it's coming from a mine held outside China, all of that gold that also gets added to the Shanghai Gold Exchange as well, almost all of that is kept in the country. And so if you look at the Chinese gold manufacturing capacity, or the mine capacity, it also has to go through the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So all of this gold has to go through their market, and they have rules about how much gold can go through the market. And so I wanted to try to figure this out. And there are multiple pieces to this puzzle. So I'm just going to kind of go in order of pieces that I've been figuring out here. And the first thing that we're going to look at is where do we get information on what China exports? That seems to be the big one. How much does China export? Because we saw on the previous chart, they create a lot of it goes through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, not much goes out, but how much goes out? Well, interestingly enough, I found this little UN website that tracks commodities, and they put here the United Nations Comtrade database aggregates detailed global annual and monthly trade statistics by product and trading partner for use by governments, academia, research institutes, and enterprises. Data compiled by the United Nations Statistics Divisions covers approximately 200 countries and represents more than 99% of the world's merchandise trade. Information can be extracted in a variety of formats, including API developer tools for integration, blah, blah, blah. So you can automate this, you can just query it. And so I went in here and just, started querying it. And this is the interface that you get as this loads up. I'm just going to show you the report in a moment. But if you wanted to look at gold, for example, you just type gold in here and it's got a certain product number. It's all the way down here that you can get to, and you can query the data, and it will tell you all of the exports from China to the world. And that's what I've done. And that's what we're going to show you here in the chat. It looks like we have almost 100 joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining. The program member super chats are open. I'll run this ticker across the bottom. Thank you for all the support, people on the channel. Thank you for your contributions. And if you're interested in a super chat, please put that down there. All right, going back to the presentation, now we want to go back to my query of the data. What did I actually see in terms of what China exported? Because remember, all of this domestic gold production and these withdrawals, almost all of this is staying in country. We just want to identify how much is going out, and then that difference can be subtracted from the total, and then we can figure out how much they're actually keeping. So I ran this report at the UN Comtrade database, and 7108 is the code for gold. And I just used 2021 as the year, and I went from China to the rest of the world. This would be exports. And you can see down here, I've got highlighted 53,495 kilograms, which equates to 53 tons. So you basically have 53 tons of gold leaving China in 2021. Well, we know if you go back, what are they actually producing? A lot more than that. And what is coming through their markets? A hell of a lot more than that. So if they're only exporting 53 tons, it's quite possible that actually comes back to their market. But in any case, it doesn't really decrement this by very much at all. And we're talking thousands of tons. And so now it makes more sense that you see this cumulative line going up, because we know the gold's not leaving China. So over time, as they're producing more themselves and more is coming into their market, it's delivered in the market. China has a lot of delivery, but it stays within the country. So that delivery is either physically moving into somebody's private storage, or more than likely it's staying on the exchange somewhere, and it's just being used as liquid gold. So there we go. We got another piece of the puzzle. Interesting. What other pieces of the puzzle can we look at? Well, we wanted to look at imports. So let's take a moment and try to figure out what Chinese imports actually are, so we can add that in. So then I thought, okay, how do we find that information? Well, go back to Nick Laird's site. He's tracking it for us, and he simply has this handy dandy chart. So we can see here, here's the Chinese gold production, and then here's the imports that come in through the Shanghai Gold Exchange. So all of these numbers are coming through Shanghai. So all of this number is part of what you see here. There's more that goes into Shanghai than just imports and production. There's other like scrap gold and things like that. So in terms of imports, they're importing a lot, and it's imported most of it through Hong Kong. So this is a Hong Kong chart, but you can see that that really peaked here about 2013, but they've still had a substantial amount of imports. And so this is all the gold that's also going into China over time, that's staying there and is not really coming out. And that's quite a bit of gold. And so we're going to have to add that into our calculation. And then, of course, I wanted to know, well, okay, how much gold essentially does China produce? And what would that have added up to? So we know since the 1990s, World Gold Council, all these entities are reporting that China has not allowed gold really to leave the country. They've got export restrictions on it. Only 13 entities like big banks and financial houses and with a government approval can export gold, but there are tight restrictions on it. We know most of it stays in. We've talked about them only exporting a little bit this year. We've talked about them importing a lot more. But really what we're trying to get down to is also, in addition to that, how much have they produced the last 20 years or 30 years when they haven't been exporting? So I've got a source for you there. So let's go to that data. And you can see here from this nice little chart from the U.S. Geological Survey, I got it from ceicdata.com. You can query and get the same graph. I simply asked according to the U.S. Geological Survey, how much has China produced? How much have they reported? So this information essentially comes from China. It's reported by the Geological Survey. This is China's data. So if you look at this, you add all this up, it adds up to a pretty big number. And you can see since the 1990s, China has really increased their gold production. So China's producing a lot more gold. They're keeping it, all of it, almost all of it, in their country. And the question is, how much then goes towards things like jewelry demand and private investment demand? And also, you kind of have to consider the fact that some gold is used in manufacturing. So when you're manufacturing computer motherboards or specialized electronic equipment that really functions best with the quality of gold in it, you'll get some gold used for that purposes. And China does a lot of manufacturing. So it is possible that some of the tonnage coming in China is used for manufacturing. But if you look at world statistics on how much gold goes into manufacturing and then extrapolate that out, we know that the vast majority of gold going into China stays in China and is not exported in terms of products. The vast majority of gold stays there. We know that from just world gold statistics on how much gold is actually used in industry. So at the end of the day, again, most gold is not leaving China. So then the question is, okay, how much do they actually have? So if we add up all the numbers that I had displayed, we come up with this little calculation. And essentially, you have the jewelry, 2,500 tons. One of the things that I didn't show was, according to the World Gold Council, in the 90s, Chinese people held 2,500 tons of jewelry. So I'm taking that number and saying, in the 90s, prior to the China keeping all gold in-house, we know they at least had 2,500 tons held by their people in form of jewelry that stayed, because then they did the export restriction. And so then what you have to add on is the People's Bank of China reports 1,980 tons. If you look at that chart of production that I showed you from the US Geological Survey, I added all that up and it's right around 8,000 tons. And then if you look at their imports in that chart that I showed you on their imports, we know it's 7,200 tons. And if you wanted, you could remove 55 tons here from export for 2021, maybe even a couple of hundred tons over the last few years. But that couple of hundred tons of export really doesn't decrement the number that much. It's a small amount. So here we come up with 20,680 tons potentially of gold that China has. Now, some of that could, again, have been used for manufacturing, but it would be the vast minority of it. The majority of it's going to be held in bar and coin form. The majority of it's going to be held by the local populace, because the People's Bank of China and the government agencies have the most amount of money. And you're talking about buying all the gold production plus almost all the gold that comes in the Shanghai Gold Exchange and is actually taken off the exchange. Remember that number. That comes out to a lot of gold. And the only people really that are going to be able to buy that much are going to be a couple of manufacturing houses will buy a little. And most of what's going to be bought is either investment in jewelry demand or by the central bank or by somebody that's going to use gold to capitalize their system, because we're talking thousands of tons. You're not going to use 20,000 tons in industry or anything close to it. They're definitely not exporting that much. We know that the people had 2,500 tons back in mid-1990s before China put export controls. So we know that maybe they have 5, 6, 7, 8,000 tons of this now. Maybe, but I doubt it. I think the central bank has most. But even if the central bank only had, say, 15,000 tons, and the people had 5,000 to 6,000 stored in jewelry form, investable format, if China wanted to, they could collect that. They could go and get that money. Simply, they could either confiscate it or offer to buy it from the people. So I include that gold, and gold that we have to consider is there for the use to support the Chinese banking system, to support the Chinese economy. Because anytime China wants, they can go buy that gold off their people, melt it into bars, and stick it on their exchange if they need to, or back their currency with it. It's not going to be a big issue for them to do that. Or they could pull, the gold confiscation card and pull it from the people. I don't think China will do that. I think they want wealth in the hands of the people because they know it strengthens the view of China's economy, the solvency of their consumer sector. And so I think Chinese government officials are going to allow the Chinese to keep their gold because it serves their purpose politically, and it keeps the people happy that they have some wealth. And I think China's trying to build up its middle class, and so it wants their people to have some wealth. So I definitely think that for the most part, they're going to encourage their people to keep that gold. But if China needed to, they could marshal the forces and get it. And so there's at least about 20,700 tons of free gold in China. And if you consider the fact that there have been rumors for over a decade that China's also buying gold from the OTC markets in London, where it doesn't get reported to a specific entity and they can buy it using third parties, they probably have a lot more. Some people have surmised they could have up to 30,000 tons if looking at some of the gold outflows from London, if a portion of that is attributed. Now, I don't have a statistic for you on that because it's private contract. There's no way for me to prove that. So I didn't put that into my estimate. But it's quite possible that the 20,680 tons that I put here for you is on the low end of that, and that China actually has more, and that it's just not being reported, or it's being stored in a depository that doesn't have to account to the official People's Bank of China statistics. And Russia, by the way, does the same thing. It's been reported that Russia puts a lot of gold in its sovereign wealth fund. And so it doesn't go into official central bank reporting statistics, but that they have a lot more there if they need it. And I think that's probably the case. And so I think it's pretty obvious that China has probably at least 20,000 tons, but probably closer to 30 or 35. And most of that's going to be owned by the People's Central Bank or the government to use in supporting their commercial banking system, their upcoming yuan CBDC if they wish, and just the overall healthy economy. And then whatever else is in the people's hands, it works from both perspectives. One, the people have it, so it makes them a stronger consumer nation. So it allows China to have a stronger argument on the world stage for how strong their economy is. But if they really need it, they could go get it from the people and maybe, you know, buy it with Chinese yuan or whatnot. Hell, maybe they'll sell US bonds. They're basically at some point going to become worthless, and go buy all that gold back from the people. But I do think that they have a lot more. And they're saying, I think 20,680 tons is probably pretty darn conservative, to be honest with you. It's probably closer to 30. But that's a good round number based upon what we see. We know they don't export a lot. We know that not a lot leaves the country. We know the People's Bank of China is buying the biggest chunk of it. We know the people buy a big chunk of it. We know that they keep all their internal production, and by law cannot export that. They're going to have very tight controls on what can leave and who can allow it to leave. And we know that they're going into other markets, to COMEX in London, and buying some. We just don't know how much. So it's quite possible that 20,680 number is really, really low, and then it's quite a bit higher. We'll just have to see. I think we're going to find out the truth before too long. And I think that, however, everybody's buying gold and silver and being taken off the market. So silver's been running off the market the last almost 2 years, as we reported on this channel. Gold's starting to come off too. We had the LBMA report and the COMEX report that I showed you during the weekly market wrap, which comes out on Sundays on our channel in the afternoon, usually 2 or 3 o'clock Central Time. We put out the weekly market wrap, and I track how much gold's coming off the exchanges, and a lot's coming off. So if you want to get your gold, you may want to get it soon. And to that point, we have a preferred provider, and that is Kinesis Money. And I'm going to show you a little bit about why you may want to sign up for Kinesis if you're looking at getting gold and silver, and you don't necessarily want to store it in your file cabinet in your house, and you're okay with storing that somewhere else for safety reasons. And also having, you know, like a virtual debit card you can use to spend that, and also having a platform in which you can, you know, trade in the gold and silver. There are currencies and cryptos as well. So that's really cool. Thing about Kinesis, of course, you'll see in the ticker scrolling across the screen, you've got my sign up code there. It does help the channel. So it does support the channel. So you guys are interested, you can use that. It's also in the description down below as well. Let's talk a little bit about Kinesis. I want to show you the yields, because this is the question I get the most. How do they pay these yields? How on earth did they pay all these yields, and what are the yields? Well, if you go back to last Thursday night's video, I had the CEO of Kinesis on the program, and I asked him all these questions, a lot of pointed questions about how do they afford all this, and he answered them. So if you guys are interested, go to Thursday night's video, and the CEO describes exactly how all this works. And I'm going to show you in a moment how you can see the amount of money they're bringing in and how they can pay these yields. It's going to be on my account. It's right there, and I'll show that to you in a moment. But I wanted to walk through what the yields are. So say you're interested in gold and silver, you know you don't want to put it in your basement, you've got enough there, or you don't want to have that invasion risk. And by the way, I want to address a point here. A lot of people say if you don't hold it, you don't own it, and never store it somewhere else. The biggest risk with that, when you're a risk managed approach to your financials, is yes, there's no counterparty risk when you own it, but there is a physical safety risk. Well, actually is a counterparty risk. The counterparty risk is the next guy down the street who knows you have it and they rob you at gunpoint. So there is counterparty risk in having it in your home. And especially for a guy like me, which is a gold and silver guy, I'm definitely not going to keep it here. But why would I? You know, I'll keep it someplace safe. So Kinesis is a great way to do it. They do have yields every time a transaction is made. there is a yield to who's making the transaction, or a fee is taken, I'm sorry, and it's moved in the master fee pool, and that's paid out in various ways. Half of the master fee pool gets distributed back to users every month. There's a minter's yield when you're creating new gold and silver on the blockchain by either buying it or facilitating them taking delivery of it. And there's certain types of gold and silver they will take delivery of if you really want to do that. There's a holder's yield. I get these all the time for just simply holding it. So even if I'm not spending it, I get a yield. That was 15% recently. The minter's yield was 5%. The referrer's yield was 7.5%. And you'll see if you guys sign up, I'll get a little bit of referrer's yield, and that's what helps the program. I just get a little baby bit here, but that added up to 7.5%. Velocity yield, 10%, and KVT yield. Velocity yield is the speed at which it moves, because they want it to move so they get those transaction fees so they can pay out the yields, and so that people use the platform, and it facilitates use of the platform. It legitimizes the Kinesis, 𝙎𝙀, and 𝙎𝙀 as being legitimate tradable tokens based upon real gold and silver. And so this is very unique. A lot of people don't have that, but it basically makes the ecosystem work. Otherwise, everybody would be holding and nobody would be spending, and then you wouldn't have transaction fees and you wouldn't be facilitating trade. Well, they facilitate trade this way. And then, of course, if you own the KVTs, which is the investment side, which I do own one of these, you get a yield as well. So how do you know how much Kinesis is making and then actually pay these yields out? Well, as Thomas let us know, they basically track the master fee pool on your account. So you guys are seeing my account. This is my name up here, Robert 𝙯𝙀, verified user. And they, as of this particular moment, $234,000 US in master yields. And you can even hover over this and it'll tell you how much goes into which pool. Remember, there's a minter's pool, a holder's pool, and all of that. And you can track it right there. And then if you want to know if it's actually getting paid out, well, I can show you that over here on transactions. On my account, you can see that I have accrued some referrers yield for people signing up. I got a holder's yield for what I held, and those are the ones I get the most. And I do actually send. So I have received and sent payments. I did send, I did finance the account here with some extra money, and I did send a payment out to my social media person for the great work that she does, and everything went through smoothly. So that's my account, and this is how the yields work. If you guys are interested, like I said, scrolling across the screen, we did have the referral link, and you can see that on the description as well. And that does help the program. All right, I'm going to go check and see whether you guys have questions. I don't see any super chats. Let's go ahead and end up the poll, guys. The poll was, what's going on with China's gold reserves? Well, 6% of you said, well, they have the stated 1980 and no more. And that could be a perfectly legitimate position to take. We just then have to explain where the other 18,000 tons went, and maybe it went somewhere. We just have to figure that out. And that could be the answer, but I think most of you have the right answer, which is more than likely much more than that. And I think the data here basically showed that. Only 2% said they lie and have very little gold. I don't think most people would attribute China being very intelligent as they are financially and being long-term thinkers, that they don't have gold. And I think that's correct. And only 2% of you voted on that. And then 11% of you said, hey, maybe they bought the Grand Canyon gold. I know Bix has talked about this quite a bit. And if there is gold there, it wouldn't surprise me if the China wants to buy it. I mean, that sounds like a China move. Do they actually have it in Grand Canyon? We don't know. I'm being a little facetious and fun, but hey, maybe they do. And if they do, I guarantee you China knows whether they do, and they're probably going to be the first one to buy it. All right. That has been the report, ladies and gentlemen, on how much gold does China have. And I'm going to put it back up on the screen. My best guess, based on publicly available information that makes sense to me, this is where it comes from. They had jewelry in the 90s, 2,500 tons to the people. You add in their current official statistics of 1980 tons held by the People's Bank of China, 8,000 tons of production since then, 99.9%, which has stayed in the country due to export controls. And they've also imported 7,200 tons into the Shanghai Gold Exchange, most of which has stayed in China, either for commercial investment purposes, retail investment purposes, or some moderate amount of demand for the gold industry in China, including usage in computers and some electronics, although that is the high minority of the gold used. I think that's probably pretty close to a reasonable baseline, low-ended guess for what China has. And I think if you look at what they are getting surreptitiously behind the scenes in London and COMEX, it could be 30,000 pretty easily, would not surprise me. Now, not all 30,000 of that may be backing the maybe used as reserves in the People Bank of China ultimately would back the yuan and eventually the digital yuan. But I think the majority of it probably is, and the rest has been distributed to society to help the people and other government agencies that may want a little gold and silver as well on their books from an accounting perspective. Because remember, Basel III states properly priced hedged gold is a high quality liquid asset in the Western financial system. And if it's a proper asset in the Western financial system, why wouldn't it be in the Eastern financial system? Why wouldn't Russia, China, and the rest of the BRICS nations be using gold to capitalize their banks as well? So it's quite possible that China has a very rich cache of gold being used not only by the central bank and not only by the people, but being used by government agencies, the banking system, the commercial banks. And little bits of that distributed throughout their system could help their economic stability as well. And certainly we think that that is a lot more than what we hold in the U.S. The official reserves in the U.S. are over 8,000 tons. We haven't had an audit in 70 years. More than likely, there's a lot less, but we don't know. But I think it's certainly a good position to take that China has more gold than the U.S. does based upon all the data that I showed you today. I think that's a safe position to take. This is going to be just about it. Oh, Tree Climber had a question. He says, is it true that Chinese gold is yellower? I'm going to leave that one and say I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But hey, one thing I will say, China does have gorgeous coins, the pandas. I fully recommend you guys grab one of those. They're a beautiful coin. There aren't a lot of sovereign coins to speak of, probably 8 or 9 more popular ones, and then some lesser known ones. China is one of the ones that's well respected, has a great design. I own some Chinese pandas. Be aware that there are some fake gold and silver coins, mostly gold because silver is a little bit cheaper. It doesn't make a lot of sense to fake a lot of that, but there's enough money in a gold coin to fake one. Some of that has come out of China. Some of that's come out from other places, but it's not just Chinese pandas. It's American eagles and others, and they've been found. Most of what you buy is not, and if you buy from a reputable dealer, they would have tested it using a lot of different ways, magnetism and radio waves and the little tools that they use, scratch tests, things like that, chemical tests. So if you're buying from a reputable dealer, you probably don't have to worry about that. You can get your gold panda and know that's legitimately a gold panda. But if you're buying on the secondary market, just be aware that there's some stuff out there that may not be legitimate. And it may be a Chinese gold panda, it may be an American eagle. Just be careful on that. Make sure that you're buying from a reputable dealer like Kinesis, which is going to test all their gold coming in. They have their own exchange, the ABX exchange, and they do all of that. And all of that gold in their exchange, which they built first, supports their product with Kinesis. I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the live. This has been Gold, Silver, Pros, Cowboy Metals Live, where we broadcast from our great state of Texas, and we take no BS, and we tell you the truth and bring you the data. This has been our December 27th, the last live stream of the year, ladies and gentlemen. Next time I come to you on Tuesday Night Live, it's going to be next year, I think. Oh, let me check the calendar before I say it. Yep, we're going to be on the 3rd, January 3rd. So it'll be the 1st of next year. Stay tuned to the channel. We're going to do a lot of predictions and have a lot of fun with that one. And of course, stay tuned to the channel Thursday. We've got great content coming to you. I know what it is, but I can't tell you it's a surprise, but I think you guys will like it. Thanks for staying tuned to the channel. Till next time, Rob Kientz, goldsilverpros.com.